Who is the biggest troll in history? The guy who opened a fake #1 restaurant in London using Google reviews and his back garden and shed with microwave meals. That was incredible. He also faked his way into Paris fashion show as a designer with knockoff clothes. Then whenever people around the world want to interview him about these things, he sends lookalikes instead. It must be quite exhausting knowing him. April Fool's Day 1974, when a man burned 70 rubber tires on a dormant volcano in Alaska. This has to be up there. He waited 3 years to get a helicopter to fly the tires to the top to get a picture perfect condition. He even got the Coast Guard called out too. Porky's favorite response to the prank came in 1980. He received a letter from an attorney in Denver, inside of which was a clipping from the Denver Post with a photo of Mount Street. Helen's erupting. Attached was a note that read, "This time, you little bastard, you've gone too far." Amazing. Mozart didn't like this singer so much that he wrote a piece for her with high and low notes constantly because he noticed that when she hit low notes her chin went to her chest and when she hit high notes her head would fling back. So it was like she was bobbing like a chicken. There was a Prussian, I can't remember his name, who managed to make a officer uniform out of scraps of clothing. He used it to convince a few guards on patrol to follow him into a government building, ordered the arrest of the man in charge, confiscated all the money personally, sent the arrested man to Berlin claiming it was all on order of the king. He then ditched the uniformed, got on a train to Berlin and managed to beat the guards there. He then sat back and watched the absolute confusion happen. The guy was eventually arrested, but the public turned him into a celebrity and his actions into a play that was performed all over Germany. He wasn't incarcerated for long, and after his release he lived an easy life from there on. In the 30s 40s BBC did an April Fool's broadcast where they told people how spaghetti was made. On trees. They literally showed fake spaghetti trees, and since not many people in that time knew how spaghetti was made, lots of people believed it. The old-timey New York City newspaper The Sun Imo. In the 19th century, they published some articles about the presence of life on the moon like unicorns, winged humans, and other creatures who built temples and lived peacefully. This caused a massive moon craze until it was later outed as fake. Technically this isn't a troll, since it was serving a purpose. But Admiral Nelson was escaping a French fleet when a man fell overboard. It was Nelson's policy of never leaving anyone behind, so he turned his ship around to go pick him up. The French saw his ship turn back toward them, assumed he had reinforcement coming beyond the horizon, so they turned and ran. I was thinking more like the mortician who patented the automatic telephone switch 3 years after finding out his rival's wife worked as a telephone operator and would reroute calls asking for his funeral parlor to her husband's. The guy put a whole worldwide workforce out of work for one person's actions. Spite is a powerful thing. Theodore Hook, the perpetrator of the Berners Street hoax in London in 1810, in which Cook sent thousands of letters summoning all manners of various vendors and service people and physicians and dignitaries and others to all come to one random person's home, literally shutting down a large part of London as they all descended upon the same address throughout the day, all while Cook and a friend sat watching from a house across the street, presumably laughing their asses off the whole time. Basically, the first ever DDoS. In China there was the War of the Three Kingdoms. The Wei, Shu, and Wu. Two of their armies met in battle and the smaller was out of arrows. They were separated by a river. One night, the leader of the smaller army stocked the front of their boats/rafts with straw bales and moved toward the opposing army over the river. They were immediately hailed with arrows. The men ducked behind the straw, while the arrows stuck in the straw, undamaged. They then sailed away and yelled, We thank you for the arrows. We will return them shortly. This may just be a tall tale from Romance of the Three Kingdoms, but it may be true. Didn't George R. Martin once say that in the future he would love to get people so immersed in a fantasy world novel and never finish it? Stephen Hawking was in an interview when a cord was unplugged. An alarm went off. This was before he was completely immobile, and he slumped in his chair. The people interviewing him were scared out of their minds until they realized that he was alright and chuckling at his joke. The cord and alarm were for a computer. Eric the Red. He wanted people to come and live in his newfound ice-covered land, so he named it Greenland. Hey, I heard there's this even better place called Wineland, just a bit further. The Moth Earth Peeper who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. Marcel Duchamp, who, among other fun things, submitted a urinal as an art piece to the Society of Independent Artists under a pseudonym, and then was part of the board that was set to approve pieces. He also spread rumors of another piece he was working on so people wouldn't suspect anything. Love that dude. Plus he sparked an interesting discussion in art. I forget the name, but that one guy from the 1800s who bought specific tickets to a play and then gave them away to bald men on the street, so that when everyone took their seats and the bald men's heads reflected the light from the stage, they spelled out Peeper's scene from the stage. Diogenes. He became notorious for his philosophical stunts, such as carrying a lamp during the day, claiming to be looking for an honest man. He criticized Plato, disputed his interpretation of Socrates, and sabotaged his lectures, sometimes distracting listeners by bringing food and eating during the discussions. Diogenes was also noted for having mocked Alexander the Great, both in public and to his face, when he visited Corinth in 336 BC. This Chinese general whose city was besieged by a much larger army, so he opened the main gate and sat atop it playing his flute. The enemy thought it was a trap, so they packed their stuff and left. Gregor MacGregor. He was a Scotsman who claimed to own land in the New World. He got fake maps printed, fake pictures drawn, then published it all in a big convincing book. He then got over 200 people to emigrate to this paradise and, get this, dropped them in the Central American jungle. Many died. Some returned and blamed the expedition guide for directing them to the wrong location, still believing Gregor's story. The more you read, the crazier it gets. Giles Corey. A farmer caught up in the Salem witch trials. He was sentenced to pressing being slowly crushed by stones to force him to make a plea. Every time he was questioned, he simply said more weight. He died without making a plea. The dude who somehow got a network news program to say that a plane that crashed was piloted by 4 men with the names Holy fuck. Something Wang. We too low. Bang ding ow. The guy who decided to put an ice troll 3/4 the way up the path to High Hrothgar. Basil Zaharoff. A Greek arms dealer. He once donated a submarine to the Greek government. He then told the Turks that the Greeks had a submarine and sold them 2 submarines. Lastly, he went to the Russians and told them the Turks had 2 submarines, so he sold them 2 as well. None of the submarines actually worked. Edit. Donated to the Greeks, not sold. Theodore Roosevelt. He got shot, went on a 1-hour speech mocking his assassin, and then went to hospital. Michelangelo without a doubt. This man was hired to paint a chapel and put more peeps and asses on it than you ever did see. Pope, my boy, this is a holy place. Please treat it with the utmost respect. Michelangelo. He PP. Whoever decided to delete Club Penguin. Global warming. Russians. And how they continuously retreated when Napoleon tried to attack them, resulting him giving up due to the situations his army was facing, like disease. Orson Welles did a radio play that told people the Martians were invading. The next day he told everyone that his play had freaked out millions of people, when it was a few dozen at most. The prophet Elijah heckled the priests of Baal because their god would not set fire to their sacrifice. Ike. The Bible says the priests of Baal prayed all day while Elijah heckled them. Hey cool sacrifice guys. And by cool, I mean not on fire. Those guys that wrote Kilroy was here during WW2. Whoever told people to rush Area 51? Don't know if this has been said, but Stalin. He convicted his closest friends of treason, then had them sentenced to death. Later on, they were blindfolded and awaiting the firing squad's bullets. The squad fired blanks. Stalin pulled the blindfolds off and said gotcha. Legend. France building a fake Paris in WWI to confuse German bomber pilots. This will be buried. But Sergei Korolev. The dude was getting frustrated with the Soviet government because they weren't interested in funding his space exploration projects. So he got his propaganda group to publish articles about how Russia was getting close to sending something into space. As expected, the US took the bait and started working on their satellite program. And the Soviet government freaked out when they saw the US doing that. So they funded Korolev's projects. He and his group played them good. The guy who faked cancer at r/teenagers. George Sarmanazar, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Frenchman who pretended he are royal from the island of Formosa, now modern-day Taiwan, came up with his own fake religion, diet, and language with peeping syntax that he taught in universities across Europe. This was in the 17th century. The employee at the Four Seasons landscape that took the reservation for the Trump campaign without asking questions. Clearly they knew it was a mistake, not like their company is a well-known place for presidential speeches. Reddit user. Malleable Duck Rickrolled. Rick Astley here in Reddit. Miyamoto Musashi. Known to be one of the greatest swordsmen in the history of Japan. He had an undefeated dueling record because he would always psych out his opponent. He would show up late to the duels by several hours. Once he even showed up after a night of drinking. Another time he was late to a duel and arrived by raft, and his excuse was that it took a long time to carve a raft from logs using his sword.